Mary Poppins was once the sweet dream of childhood. But behind Disney's magic lies a cruel truth. The cast members gradually passed away, many in heartbreaking tragedies. Some lost their children, others took their own lives. Some lived with illness their entire lives, and some died alone in nursing homes. Prepare yourself, because this then and now journey will leave you both shaken and sorrowful. Matthew Garber as Michael Banks. When Matthew Garber was only 8 years old, he brought to life the mischievous and imaginative boy Michael Banks in Mary Poppins, 1964. The role placed the young British actor among Disney's child stars, forever etching his place in audiences' hearts alongside Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. Although it was just a small part in the vast world of cinema, Garber's Michael Banks became a symbol of childhood, tied forever to the success of the Oscar-winning film that claimed 5 Academy Awards. Yet behind the brief spotlight was a fragile journey filled with loss. Born on March 25, 1956, in Stepney, London, to parents with a background in theater, Matthew Garber was described as intelligent, mischievous, and full of life. But his story turned tragic in 1976 during a trip to India, where he contracted hepatitis. Due to lack of knowledge and his young age, the illness quickly developed into hemorrhagic pancreatitis, a death sentence with no reversal. From a boy full of promise, Matthew lost both his youth and his career in the blink of an eye. On June 13, 1977, Matthew Garber took his last breath at Royal Free Hospital in London. He was only 21 years old. His body was cremated 3 days later at St. Marylebone Crematorium. His net worth at the time was estimated at about $500,000, largely from the 3 Disney films he had appeared in. Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins. When Julie Andrews was 29 years old, she stepped into the role of the magical nanny Mary Poppins in the 1964 film of the same name. With her angelic voice and graceful presence, she breathed immortal life into the character, transforming Mary Poppins into a timeless cinematic icon and earning herself the Academy Award for Best Actress. Overnight, Julie Andrews rose from being a Broadway stage star to one of Hollywood's most unshakable names of the 1960s. But behind the dazzling glory was a lifelong pain. Julie Elizabeth Wells, born on October 1, 1935 in Walton-on-Thames, England, grew up in a fractured childhood, scarred by her parents' separation and the tensions of a remarried household. Though she overcame those early wounds to achieve worldwide acclaim, fate dealt her a devastating blow in midlife. In 1997, what was supposed to be a routine operation to remove vocal cord polyps turned disastrous. Her vocal cords were permanently damaged, silencing forever the legendary 4-octave voice that had defined her career. For an artist who lived for music, it was nothing short of a death sentence. Andrews fell into a deep depression, underwent psychological treatment, and carried a wound that would never fully heal. Now, in 2025, Julie Andrews is 90 years old. She no longer sings, but she remains a living icon, finding comfort in writing children's books, voice acting, and preserving her Disney legacy. Her net worth is estimated at $30 million. Yet for audiences, the most valuable thing she leaves behind is not measured in money, but in the memory of the woman who once stood atop the roof of 17 Cherry Tree Lane, umbrella in hand, her crystal-clear voice filling the air. That voice has fallen silent forever, but its echo continues to linger, reminding the world that even the brightest stars carry within them a pain that calls for our compassion. Glynis Johns as Mrs. Banks. When Glynis Johns was 41 years old, she played Winifred Banks, the socially active mother in Mary Poppins, 1964. With her husky, alluring voice and graceful charm, she made audiences both laugh and feel moved as she performed the song Sister Suffragette. That role cemented Johns as an unforgettable part of childhood memories, for millions, standing alongside Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke in Disney's classic masterpiece. But behind the stage lights was a life filled with heartbreak. Glynis Margaret Payne Johns, born on October 5, 1923 in Pretoria, South Africa, endured 4 failed marriages. Her first husband cheated on her, the next ended in bitterness, and the later ones closed in separation. Each time she walked away from a marriage, she carried deeper wounds, with the worst scars coming from emotional abuse and betrayal. Those repeated fractures left Johns with a heart full of cracks that could never be fully mended. The greatest tragedy of her life, however, did not come from love, but from motherhood. Her only son, actor Gareth Forwood, died in 2007 after suffering a heart attack while undergoing cancer treatment. Johns admitted that it was a loss beyond measure, a blow that broke her spirit and condemned her to live the rest of her years in the shadow of grief and loneliness. With no family left to lean on, she entered a nursing home in Los Angeles, where she quietly watched her past glory fade, left only with memories and lingering sorrow. On January 4, 2024, Glynis Johns passed away at the age of 100, closing the curtain on more than 7 decades of devotion to the arts. Her net worth at the time was estimated at about $5 million. At her funeral, the song "Send in the Clowns" played as a haunting farewell, reminding the world that after a century of life, Glynis Johns remained a star who carried silent sorrow deep within her heart. Dick Van Dyke as Bert. When Dick Van Dyke was 39 years old, he brought to life the playful and multi-talented Bert, a chimney sweep, a street performer, and even the elderly banker Dawes Sr. in Mary Poppins, 1964. Though he faced harsh criticism for his clumsy Cockney accent, he still captured audiences' hearts with his wit and joyful spirit. The role not only earned him and Julie Andrews a Grammy Award, but also made Van Dyke one of the immortal faces of childhood for millions around the world. Yet outside the spotlight, his real life carried many dark chapters. Richard Wayne Van Dyke, born on December 13, 1925 in West Plains, Missouri, spent much of the 1970s trapped in alcoholism. During those years, he often lost control, losing the trust of both family and colleagues. He entered rehab in 1972, but the emotional scars of those drunken years never fully disappeared. The nightmare grew heavier when his chain-smoking habit led to a lung cancer diagnosis in 2006. Although he was fortunate enough to recover, the illnesses left him with solitude and regret for a reckless past. The tragedies did not end there. One of Van Dyke's sons battled drug addiction, leaving the aging father with unending guilt. And in 2013, while driving his Jaguar on a California highway, his car suddenly burst into flames. Trapped inside and just seconds from death, he was pulled out by a passerby. The vehicle was completely destroyed, but Van Dyke escaped in a state of exhaustion, an incident that seemed to prove fate had granted him one more chance at life. By 2025, Dick Van Dyke is 100 years old. He no longer carries the agility of his youth, but he stands as a living witness of Hollywood history. His net worth is estimated at about $50 million, but such numbers pale compared to the spiritual strength he represents. Once a man consumed by addiction, illness, and tragedy, he rose again, finding new meaning in life. And for audiences, the image of Bert dancing across the rooftops of London with his radiant smile will forever remain a symbol of joy, even when behind that light was a life marked by pain. David Tomlinson as Mr. Banks. When David Tomlinson was 47 years old, he played George Banks, the stern father who eventually learns to open his heart in Mary Poppins, 1964. With a performance that was both humorous and moving, Tomlinson transformed the image of a rigid man into a symbol of redemption and fatherly love. That role not only helped etch the film deeply into audiences' memories, but also made him one of Disney's most representative faces of the 1960s. But behind the kind smile on screen was a terrifying personal tragedy. David Cecil McAllister Tomlinson, born on May 7, 1917, in Henley-on-Thames, Oxfordshire, carried a wound that never healed. In 1943, shortly after marrying his first wife, Mary Lindsay Hidding, he received devastating news. She and her 2 children from a previous relationship had leapt from a high floor of a New York hotel in a shocking murder-suicide. The trauma haunted Tomlinson for the rest of his life, leaving a darkness he always hid beneath his cinematic smile. Later, although he remarried and had 4 sons with actress Audrey Freeman, the ghosts of the past never left him. During World War II, he had narrowly escaped death when the Tiger Moth plane he was piloting crashed into a forest, and in old age, Tomlinson endured further suffering. A stroke in 1997 left him partially paralyzed and robbed him of his ability to speak. For an artist, it was as though the most precious tool to communicate with the world had been taken away. He spent his final years in silence, depression, and the shadow of unbearable loss. On June 24, 2000, David Tomlinson passed away in his sleep at King Edward VII's Hospital at the age of 83. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $2 million, a modest sum compared to the spiritual legacy he left behind. On his gravestone, he once joked he wanted engraved the words, "An actor of genius, irresistible to women," a final nod to the life he had lived. Karen Dotrice as Jane Banks. When Karen Dotrice was just 9 years old, she played Jane Banks, the innocent, curious little girl in Mary Poppins, 1964. With her bright eyes and natural charm, Dotrice became a child star known worldwide. Alongside Matthew Garber, she brought life to the Banks children, making audiences believe that Mary Poppins's magic could transform a cold household into a warm family. That moment of destiny turned Karen from an unknown little girl into one of Disney's brightest child stars. But the real life of Karen Dotrice, born on November 9, 1955 in Guernsey, Channel Islands, was far from a fairy tale. As an adult, she faced marital tragedy when her first husband, actor Alex Hyde White, was unfaithful, leading to their divorce in 1992. Karen was left to raise their child alone, a period filled with pain and loneliness. This devastating blow pushed her further away from the spotlight. She admitted she had feared fame since childhood, and by the 1980s, Karen decided to leave show business entirely, abandoning her acting career to escape the pressures of stardom. By 2025, Karen Dotrice is 70 years old. She no longer appears before cameras, instead choosing a quiet life with her second husband, Ned Nall, and her children. Her net worth is estimated at around $1 million, largely from her Disney film legacy and later voice work. But her true value lies beyond money. Audiences will always remember Karen as the sweet Jane Banks, singing with a clear voice, holding Michael's hand as they embarked on magical adventures with Mary Poppins. Ed Wynn as Uncle Albert. When Ed Wynn was 78 years old, he played Uncle Albert, the innocent old man who laughed so hard he floated up to the ceiling, in the legendary film Mary Poppins, 1964. With his quivering voice, eccentric mannerisms, and natural charm, Wynn delivered one of the funniest and warmest scenes in Disney history. Yet few knew that behind the cheerful image on screen, he was struggling with illness and private darkness, even as Hollywood's spotlight continued to shine on him. Isaiah Edwin Leopold, born on November 9, 1886 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, dedicated his entire life to making audiences laugh, while often swallowing his own tears. Wynn struggled with a gambling addiction that cost him his fortune and nearly destroyed his career in the 1930s. The tragedy of his life grew heavier as all 3 of his marriages ended in failure, leaving the comedy legend with loneliness and a fractured family. Though he managed to rebuild his career and reclaim fame, the years of vice took a toll, leaving him with a deteriorating body and a tormented spirit in his final years. On June 19, 1966, Ed Wynn passed away in Beverly Hills after a long battle with esophageal cancer at the age of 79. Even during his last months, he kept working, trying to maintain his smile in front of the cameras, despite his body being frail. His net worth at the time of death was estimated at around $1 million, along with the immortal memory of the old clown who made the world laugh. On his tombstone, the brief words read, "Dear God, thanks, Ed Wynn," a moving final farewell. Hermione Baddeley as Ellen. When Hermione Baddeley was 58 years old, she appeared as Ellen, the clumsy but spirited maid, in the classic film Mary Poppins, 1964. Though only a minor character, she remained unforgettable with her mischievous performance, distinct Cockney accent, and ability to turn small moments into bursts of laughter. Behind that charm was a long and respected career on both stage and screen, where Hermione was celebrated as one of Britain's most memorable queens of supporting roles. But the private life of Hermione Yolanda Ruby Clinton Baddeley, born on November 13, 1906 in Broseley, Shropshire, was filled with pain. She endured 2 failed marriages, including one to an abusive husband who left lasting emotional scars. Later, she sought love in a relationship with actor Lawrence Harvey, only to be abandoned when he left her for someone else. Those repeated heartbreaks left Hermione with loneliness and bitterness, forcing her to rely on the stage as the only place to escape her private sorrows. Fate continued to test her. In her later years, Hermione suffered a series of strokes that gradually robbed her of her ability to speak, the cruelest blow for an actress known for her quick wit and eloquence. In her final days, she lived in silence, burdened by illness and haunted by the wreckage of past relationships. On August 19, 1986, Hermione Baddeley passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 79. Her net worth was around $800,000, but for the public, her greatest legacy remained Ellen, the silly maid who brought laughter, standing in tragic contrast to a real life marked by loss and solitude. Elsa Lanchester as Katie Nana. At 62, Elsa Lanchester appeared in Mary Poppins, 1964, as Katie Nana, the grumpy nanny who storms off at the very beginning of the film. Though it was only a small role, her presence set the stage for Mary Poppins's magical arrival and reinforced her lifelong mark as an actress known for eccentric, sharp-witted characters. Audiences already knew her from Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, but Disney gave Elsa another chance to secure her place in the memories of generations. Yet the private life of Elsa Sullivan Lanchester, born October 28, 1902 in Lewisham, London, was filled with shadows. She married Charles Laughton in 1929, a brilliant actor who was also secretly homosexual. Their marriage became a social facade, leaving Elsa with a deep sense of loneliness within her own home. With no children and no lasting emotional anchor, she admitted to turning to alcohol to fill the emptiness. A house fire in 1930 nearly cost her life and deepened her sense of fragility, while her eccentric habits gradually alienated her from friends, leaving her isolated even amid the glitter of Hollywood. In her later years, illness struck repeatedly. Elsa suffered from severe bronchial pneumonia and the effects of 2 strokes that left her bedridden and completely dependent on the care provided by the Motion Picture Relief Fund. On December 26, 1986, she passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 84. Her net worth was estimated at $1.5 million, mostly from her work in classic films. But what remains is not the number, but the image of an artist who lived her life in the shadow of her famous husband, and who left the world as a lonely figure. A Katie Nana who walked off the stage forever. Jane Darwell as Birdwoman. At 85, Jane Darwell appeared as the Birdwoman in Mary Poppins, 1964, the elderly lady sitting on the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral, selling bags of crumbs to feed the pigeons. Though she appeared for only a few minutes, that scene became one of Disney's most touching moments, forever tied to the song Feed the Birds. It was also Darwell's final role, closing a career that spanned more than half a century, with over 170 films and an Academy Award to her name. Behind the glory, however, was a life marked by loss. Patty Woodard, born October 15, 1879, in Palmyra, Missouri, grew up in a wealthy family but had to give up her dreams of joining the circus or opera due to her father's opposition. Adopting the stage name Jane Darwell, she built a career in theater and Hollywood at the cost of a lonely life with no marriage and no children. During the war years, she endured the grief of losing loved ones in World War II, plunging her into depression. The tragedy deepened in 1940 when her house was destroyed in a fire, leaving her haunted by the memory for the rest of her life. In her later years, Darwell continued to work despite failing health, struggling with recurring heart problems. Her relentless dedication eventually left her spending her final days in a nursing home. On August 13, 1967, Jane Darwell died of a heart attack at the age of 87. Her net worth was estimated at around $700,000, but her greatest legacy remains the image of the Bird Woman, sitting quietly in London's square, a symbol of fragility, loneliness, and the humanity of a truly great artist. Reginald Owen as Admiral Boom. At 77, Reginald Owen appeared in Mary Poppins, 1964, as Admiral Boom, the eccentric retired naval officer who firmly believed the world outside was in a state of perpetual war. Dressed in his imposing uniform, with a fierce gaze and his cannon blasts echoing across the London rooftops, he created one of the film's most memorable supporting characters. It was a late role in his career, yet it ensured that Owen's name would be remembered by modern audiences, alongside the hundreds of stage and film roles he had played since the early 20th century. But the private life of John Reginald Owen, born on August 5, 1887 in Hertfordshire, England, was filled with hidden sorrows. His greatest tragedy came when his first wife died of cancer, leaving him with a grief that never healed. Loneliness drove him into gambling, which led to years of lingering debt. A severe car accident in 1950 left him badly injured and weakened his health. Heavy smoking further eroded his body, while advancing heart disease cast a dark shadow over his later years. On November 5, 1972, Reginald Owen died suddenly of a heart attack in Boise, Idaho, at the age of 85. He was laid to rest at Morris Hill Cemetery. His net worth at the time was estimated at around $600,000, most of it from classic films. The image of Admiral Boom standing on his rooftop, firing cannons into the sky in Mary Poppins, has since become a bittersweet symbol, a performer who carried dignity and authority on screen, yet in real life quietly fell under the weight of personal tragedy. Reta Shaw as Mrs. Brill. At 52, Reta Shaw took on the role of Mrs. Brill, the housekeeper, in Mary Poppins, 1964. A humorous but memorable supporting character, constantly flustered in the kitchen and always complaining about the chaos in the Banks household. Though her time on screen was brief, Shaw perfectly captured the image of a hard-working, no-nonsense, and somewhat sharp-tongued woman, reflecting the type of roles she was often cast in throughout her career in American television and film during the 1960s. Reta M. Shaw was born on September 13, 1912, in South Paris, Maine. Behind her stern voice and tough exterior lay a private life filled with heartbreak. She married actor William Forrester, but the union collapsed quickly, ending in a bitter divorce. Left to raise her young daughter alone, Shaw carried the heavy weight of loneliness and disappointment. To cope, she developed a chain-smoking habit that became her escape from life's pressures. Over time, that habit sowed the seeds of the illness that would consume her later years. Toward the end of her life, her declining health forced her to leave the stage and screen earlier than she had hoped. On January 8, 1982, Reta Shaw died in Encino, California, of complications from severe emphysema at the age of 69. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at about $500,000, earned mostly from film and television. Her image in Mary Poppins, a grouchy yet authentic housekeeper, remains iconic today, a reminder of her ability to breathe life into even the smallest roles. Arthur Malet as Mr. Dawes, Jr. At 37, Arthur Malet played Mr. Dawes, Jr., the son of the bank president in Mary Poppins, 1964. Although it was only a small role, his weary eyes and frail appearance left a strong impression, as if old age had weighed heavily upon him, even though in real life he was still very young. This ability to portray characters far beyond his actual age turned Malet into a familiar face in countless supporting roles as elderly, world-weary men throughout his decades-long career. Vivian Arthur Rivers. Malet was born on September 24, 1927, in Lea-on-the-Solent, Hampshire, England. After moving to the United States to build his career, his private life became overshadowed by sorrow. Following a failed marriage, Malet chose a solitary and reclusive existence, distancing himself from family life and burying himself in work. In his later years, he was forced to confront Parkinson's disease, a cruel illness that left his hands trembling, his steps unsteady, and eventually forced him to leave the stage behind, spending his final years in a nursing home. A devastating fall in 2000 shattered his bones and condemned him to long days of pain and helplessness, with nothing left but memories of past glories. On May 18, 2013, Arthur Malet passed away in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 85. His net worth was only about $300,000, a modest sum for a lifetime of dedication. In the end, he was remembered only as the weary, fragile figures he played on screen, most memorably in Mary Poppins, where he embodied a trembling old man. Marjorie Bennett as Miss Lark. At 68, Marjorie Bennett appeared in the legendary Mary Poppins, 1964, as Miss Lark, the eccentric lady who doted endlessly on her little dog while strolling along Cherry Tree Lane. Though only a fleeting supporting role, it carried weight, vividly capturing her character's odd personality and adding another fine detail to the social tapestry of Disney's classic film. She was born on January 15, 1896, in York, Western Australia. Her marriage to William Cady Jr. seemed like it would be a safe harbor, but it left her with a wound that never healed. In 1950, tragedy struck when her son was killed in a car accident. That loss tore through her soul like a wound that never closed, pushing Bennett into long years of depression and loneliness. The pain did not stop there. She tried to bury herself in work, accepting every role she could, even as her health declined. But that relentless labor, combined with financial missteps that led to bankruptcy, made her later years even more exhausting. Friends often recalled that her eyes always carried a trace of sadness, as if she had never truly escaped the shock of losing her child. On June 14, 1982, Marjorie Bennett died of a heart attack in Hollywood, California, at the age of 86. Her net worth was only about $200,000, a meager sum for a lifetime of devotion to her craft. Her ashes were laid to rest at Forest Lawn, Glendale, and in the memories of audiences, the image of Miss Lark and her little dog remains a tragic yet proud symbol of an artist who gave everything to the screen. Mary Poppins once brought laughter and magic to millions of viewers, but the price its cast paid was steep, filled with tragedy and tears. Are you surprised by the painful truths hidden behind this so-called Disney dream? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to uncover more of Hollywood's darkest secrets.